For most of the 20th century, America sold a dream to the world. A simple, powerful idea. If you worked hard, competed fairly, and built something better, opportunity would find you. This wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was baked into the very structure of the American economy. Small businesses were the backbone of communities, industries were full of healthy competition, and the system was designed to prevent any single company from calling all the shots. Opportunity was never a guarantee, but it was always within reach. Think about the era after World War II. The United States stepped into one of the most economically balanced periods it had ever seen. Antitrust laws weren't just on the books, they were actively enforced. When powerful corporations got too big for their britches, they were broken up. This wasn't about punishing success, it was about protecting the playing field for everyone else. And it worked. Wages grew right alongside productivity. In the 1950s and 60s, a factory worker could support a family, own a home, and look forward to a decent retirement. The economy wasn't about dominance, it was about participation. Growth was something everyone shared, and competition was a value to be protected. But this system, this vibrant, competitive economy, didn't vanish in a flash. The change was slow, almost invisible at first. It began in the late 1970s and gathered steam in the early 80s. A new way of thinking started to take hold in the halls of power, a philosophy that argued bigger was always better. Bigger companies were more efficient, they said, and regulation was just a ball and chain holding back progress. So the enforcement of antitrust laws started to weaken. Mergers, which were once scrutinized, began to accelerate. Entire industries started to consolidate. Instead of duking it out in the marketplace, corporations were encouraged to just buy their rivals. The very goal of the economy began to shift, moving away from building strong competitive markets and towards a single-minded focus, maximizing shareholder returns. This transformation wasn't some natural evolution. It was a deliberate redesign. The rules were rewritten. Corporations were now allowed to acquire their competitors. Instead of out-innovating them, they could control entire supply chains from the raw materials all the way to the store shelf, and they could pour enormous sums of money into lobbying and political campaigns to make sure the rules stayed in their favor. This pattern repeated itself across the board, in banking, in technology, in agriculture, in media, in healthcare, and in retail. On paper, these were still free markets. But in reality, real choice for consumers and real opportunity for new businesses began to fade away. Over time, our entire perspective on competition flipped. It went from being something precious that needed protection to being seen as an inconvenient problem, something messy and inefficient. Size became synonymous with power, and power became a shield. The larger a company grew, the harder it was for anyone else to challenge it. Think about it. How does a new startup compete in a market controlled by a handful of giants? Innovation didn't stop because we ran out of good ideas. It slowed down because the dominant firms, safe behind their market power, no longer felt the pressure to improve. They didn't need to build a better mousetrap when they already owned the entire cheese factory. The American economy didn't lose its promise of opportunity because people stopped working hard. It lost that promise because the rules of the game changed. The system stopped rewarding effort and innovation and started rewarding control and consolidation. And when an economy gets to that point, history teaches us a very clear lesson. The consequences aren't always immediate. They build up slowly, quietly, over decades, but eventually they are always inevitable. The slow erosion of competition leads to a slow erosion of everything that made the economy dynamic and fair in the first place. Let's zoom in on what this actually looks like. In a competitive market, if a company gets greedy and raises prices too much, or lets the quality of its products slip, you, the customer, have other options. You can take your business elsewhere. That threat keeps businesses honest. It forces them to stay on their toes, to offer better products at better prices. But when one or two companies control an entire industry, where do you go? If your internet provider is slow and expensive, but they're the only game in town, you're stuck. If a drug company has a patent on a life-saving medicine and no competitors, they can charge whatever they want. This isn't a hypothetical, it's the reality for millions of people. The lack of competition isn't just an abstract economic concept, it hits our wallets every single day. And it's not just about prices, it's about wages too. When there are lots of companies competing for workers, they have to offer better pay and benefits to attract and keep talent. But in a town with only one major employer, that power dynamic flips completely. The company holds all the cards. They can suppress wages, knowing that their employees have nowhere else to go. This contributes directly to the wage stagnation we've seen for decades, where productivity has gone up and up, but the paychecks for most workers have stayed flat. The wealth created by that increased productivity didn't disappear. It just flowed upwards to executives and shareholders of these dominant firms, instead of being shared with the people doing the work. This concentration of economic power also suffocates the next generation of entrepreneurs. The American dream has always been tied to the idea that you can start something of your own, a small business, a new invention. But how can a new software company compete with a tech giant that can simply buy it, copy its features, or use its massive platform to crush it before it even gets off the ground? The playing field is no longer level. It's a steep uphill climb against entrenched incumbents who have every incentive to maintain the status quo. We lose out on the new ideas, the disruptive innovations, and the job creation that come from a vibrant startup culture. Perhaps most dangerously, this economic concentration bleeds into our political system. When companies become too big to fail, they also become too powerful to regulate. They can afford armies of lobbyists to influence legislation, shaping the rules of the economy to benefit themselves further. This creates a vicious cycle. Economic power translates into political power, which is then used to accumulate even more economic power. It undermines the very foundation of a democratic society. When a handful of corporations have more influence than millions of citizens, the system is no longer working as it should. So what's the path forward? Reversing this trend isn't about turning back the clock or being anti-business. It's about being pro-competition. It's about recognizing that a healthy market is like a healthy ecosystem. It needs diversity to thrive. It means revitalizing antitrust enforcement and scrutinizing mergers that harm competition. It means updating our laws for the 21st century economy, where data and network effects create new kinds of monopolies. It means supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs, leveling the playing field so that the best ideas can win, regardless of who they come from. Restoring competition isn't a partisan issue, it's about restoring the fundamental promise of the American economy. The promise that hard work pays off, that new ideas have a chance to flourish, and that the future is built by the many, not just controlled by a few. The consequences of inaction are already here. The choice is whether we will continue down this path or fight to rebuild an economy that works for everyone. Friends, let's talk about the economy. Not the confusing charts and numbers you see on the news, but the real-life economy that affects your job, your wallet, and your future. The path ahead of us isn't going to be a walk in the park, but what we're fighting for is incredibly important. We're talking about rebuilding an economy that actually works for everyone, not just a select few at the top. This isn't just a job for politicians in Washington. It requires action from all of us. It means policymakers finally need to step up and enforce the rules that are already on the books. It means communities like ours need to stand up and demand fairness. And it means each of us, as individuals, can make a difference by supporting businesses that choose to innovate instead of just dominate. Every choice we make, big or small, helps decide our future. It shapes whether opportunity is a real promise for all of us, or just a privilege for the lucky few. Think about it. Every time a massive merger gets approved, every time a monopoly is allowed to grow unchecked, every time a corporation exploits a loophole to avoid paying its fair share, a little piece of our promise of fairness gets chipped away. It's a slow erosion, but over time, it creates an uneven playing field. But here's the good news. The reverse is also true. Every time you support a local small business, every time a new startup gets a real shot to compete, every time a law is passed that protects fair competition, we strengthen the very foundation of our economy. This isn't just about abstract ideas, it's about spreading wealth, empowering workers, and sparking the kind of innovation that can change the world. For our economy to be truly strong, our communities must be empowered to thrive. We need to create an environment where entrepreneurs feel encouraged to take risks, to dream big, and to build businesses that create good jobs and uplift entire towns. We can't have a situation where just a handful of giant companies control entire industries. These concentrated sectors must be opened up to new competition. When that happens, consumers like you and me get real choices, better prices and better products, and just as importantly, it fosters a wave of new ideas and new energy. As citizens, we have to reclaim our voice. We need to make it clear that huge economic power should not automatically translate into unchecked political influence. The voices of the many must be louder than the wallets of the few. The story of our economy is not over. It's still being written, and we are the authors. The promise that hard work leads to a better life, that great ideas can take flight no matter where they come from, and that the marketplace can be a fair and inclusive place for everyone, that promise is still alive. But we have to be honest, it's fragile. It needs to be protected. The next chapters of this story will be written by those of us who are willing to stand up and challenge entrenched power. They will be written by those who are ready to act decisively and fight for a system where fairness, competition, and opportunity are not just empty words, but a lived reality for every single person. The path forward is clear, even if it's demanding. We need to enforce the rules, protect competition, support innovation, and make sure that wealth is something that is shared and circulated, not just hoarded at the top. This is more than just an economic debate. This is a fight for fairness. It's a fight for opportunity. It's a fight for a future where the dreams of millions of people can actually be realized. History has shown us time and time again that concentrated power doesn't last forever. Change is always possible, but only if we refuse to accept stagnation and inequality as the new normal. We have to believe that a better way is possible and be willing to work for it. The choice before us is pretty stark when you think about it. We can either sit back and allow a few corporate giants to dictate the future for all of us, or we can roll up our sleeves and reclaim that future for the many. We can restore a system where your effort, your creativity, and your perseverance are what truly matter. A system where markets are vibrant and dynamic, not stale and controlled. A system where the economy genuinely works for everyone, not just a handful of billionaires and CEOs. The time to start building that future is not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. Because at its core, this whole conversation isn't just about profits or markets or government policy. It's about a much bigger question. What kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want a society where people's dreams are stifled by overwhelming corporate dominance? Or do we want one where opportunity is real, where it's accessible, and where it's shared by all? The original promise of our economy has always been about the many, not the few. That promise is still within our grasp, but only if we choose to fight for it.